While the first two weren't produced, the last one became the basis for arguably Frank Miller's greatest work, The Dark Knight Returns. Frank Miller started on The Dark Knight Returns in 1985, working with editor Dick Giordano on the story, which he said took about 4 or 5 drafts to get to. Miller also reportedly took advice from other comic book creators, such as for John Byrne, who stated that the new Robin should be a girl, along with the inspiration from the Dirty Harry film Sudden Impact, which had the franchise character returning after a long convalescence. In The Dark Knight Returns, it tells the story of a 55-year-old Bruce Wayne who has retired from being Batman for over 10 years at the death of Jason Todd. However, Gotham City is now a dystopian crime zone, which prompts Wayne to redon the cape and cowl to fight for justice, all while recruiting a new Robin in Carrie Kelly and facing off against the revived Joker. Told over a 4-issue prestige limited series, it used glossy paper to further highlight the colorist Lynn Volley's watercolors. It was released from February through June of 1986. Giordano would leave the project halfway through due to production delays, but ultimately was released is now considered one of the greatest Batman stories ever made, if not the best one ever. Its reception was especially jarring considering the public at the time was still used to the Batman as the campy version from the 1960s Adam West TV show. This Batman was anything but, breaking bones and using guns, while the story in general also poked fun at politics and psychology across the board. Both Ronald Reagan and the media were targets. Despite its then unheard of price of $2.95 an issue, it sold in nearly 1 million copies and is today considered one of the greatest comic book stories ever told, and it's in my personal top 5. The influence of The Dark Knight Returns can't be easily dismissed either, as both it and The Watchmen by Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons that same year ushered in a dark and gritty take on comic books, something that all the creators mentioned and protested against. While there have been darker takes on Batman before, from the original stories by Bob Kang and Bill Finger to the acclaimed 1970s run by Neil Adams and Denny O'Neil, this truly set a new standard for the character and has influenced nearly every incarnation since. From the 1989 Batman film, which is an early version of the script, had Batman riding a horse like in the comic, to the more recent Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice in 2016, in which director Zack Snyder brought the cover to the first issue to life on screen. The comic would even have a direct adaptation with The Dark Knight Returns animated film in 2012 and 2013, a 2-part adventure that had Peter Weller voice Bruce Wayne and Batman, and Michael Emerson voiced the Joker. The film was instantly acclaimed for its faithfulness to the stories and even Frank Miller's art style, especially in splitting the film in 2 parts to fully adapt it. To date, it remains one of the most popular of the DC animated films. After The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller returned to Daredevil as a writer with the self-contained story in issue number 219 on June of 1985 with art by John Buscema, and then co-wrote issue number 226 in January 1986 with the departing Denny O'Neil. Then, Frank Miller teamed with artist David Mazzucchelli for Daredevil Born Again, a 7-issue arc that ran from issues number 227 to 233 on February to August of 1986, which had Daredevil dealing with the ramifications of his arch nemesis, the Kingpin, learning his secret identity and using that knowledge to destroy him. The series not only dealt with Matt Murdock Daredevil's Catholicism, but also the mystery of his missing mother, and today is considered one of the greatest Daredevil stories ever told, further cementing Miller's take on the character to the point that many consider it his definitive version, despite the character being created by comic book greats Stan Lee and Bill Everett. To date, nearly every adaptation of Daredevil in any other medium, from the Ben Affleck movie to the Netflix series, references Miller's take on the character. While also doing Daredevil Born Again, Frank Miller teamed with artist Bill Sienkiewicz for Daredevil Love and War, a graphic novel that bridged the gap between Frank Miller's original run on Daredevil and Born Again, explaining the Kingpin's changed attitude on the character. The writer-artist pairing then produced Elektra Assassin, an 8-issue miniseries under Marvel's Epic imprint that was set outside its regular continuity. As a result, it featured crazy plot twists like cyborgs and ninjas, all while expanding on Elektra's background. Despite its crazy plot, Elektra would be a hit with the fans and critics. Elektra Assassin required more writing to get the visuals down, with each issue rewritten several times to do so. Miller was especially impressed with Sienkiewicz's art ability, especially in the flashback sequences of Elektra's childhood, which he deliberately drew to resemble child drawings. Today it is considered another classic by Frank Miller, even if it's a bit more eccentric of the character. Frank Miller then returned to DC and Batman, re-teaming with artist David Mazzucchelli for Batman Year One, which ran from February to May of 1987 and Batman number 404 to 407. Part of DC's larger revamp of their heroes after the Crisis of Infinite Earths, the story retells Batman's origin as a parallel to the Jim Gordon coming to Gotham City and dealing with the corruption of the police department. The comic will be controversial in its depiction of Catwoman, who not only starts out as a prostitute, but dresses in an S&M outfit, which would later be retconned out in Zero Hour and the New 52, something DC has done quite a lot of. Overall, the story is considered another high mark for Batman and Frank Miller. While it didn't reach the heights of The Dark Knight Returns, it remains one of the most popular stories from both Batman and DC. Naturally, DC would follow up the concept with Year 2 and Year 3 stories, which Frank Miller had no involvement in, while the comic itself would be the chief inspiration for Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins movie of 2005, which launched the acclaimed Dark Knight movie trilogy. Frank Miller previously was contracted to adapt Year 1 into a movie itself with director Darren Aronofsky, though that would fall apart due to creative differences between the two, with Miller even stating that Aronofsky's vision of Batman is darker than his. Reportedly, the script had Batman rejecting his wealth and living as a bum. Batman Year 1 was eventually adapted as part of the DC Films line in 2011, featuring Benjamin McKenzie as the voice of Bruce Wayne Batman, Bryan Cranston as Jim Gordon, and Elijah Dushku as Selina Kyle Catwoman. It received near universal acclaim for its faithfulness to the comic, along with the voice acting, notably Cranston's performance as Gordon. Of fun note, Ben McKenzie would later play Jim Gordon in the Gotham TV show from 2014 to 2019, which also used Batman Year 1 as an influence. With this and The Dark Knight Returns, Frank Miller put his stamp on Batman like he did on Daredevil, with more than a few fans praising his version of The Dark Knight as the best version ever. Despite his busy work schedules, Miller still found time to provide covers for the first comic's English translation reprints of the classic manga Lone Wolf and Cub by Kazuo Kogoki and Kozuko Kojima, one of his favorites and a chief influence in many of his works, notably Ronin. With this success, Frank Miller started to be more outspoken about dealing with censorship, especially on Daredevil Born Again and Batman Year 1. In both cases, Miller protested against the company's meddling and particularly hated the rating system that DC President Jeanette Kahn wanted to implement. His argument was that books don't have ratings, why should comics? Miller even stated that children should be allowed to find out what they wanted and didn't even believe in parental advisories, which led to him writing a letter to Comics Journal for issue number 97 on April of 1985. That's not to say it was just right-wing hatred, as Miller hated liberals who promoted censorship as well, such as the Women Against Pornography. He even signed a petition with Alan Moore, Howard Chaykin, Lynn Weed, and numerous other creators in protest, which ran in the Comics Buyer's Guide. For Miller, the biggest fear wasn't that Marvel and DC would implement a rating system, as he would just not work with the companies in protest. His worry was that the retailers would follow suit and oppose a rating system on all the other publishers as well. As a result of the protests, DC dropped its rating system, but it still drove Miller away from the company for a while, as he decided to pursue independent, creator-owned work, and even a try at Hollywood. And we will leave you with the life of Frank Miller with that, but when we come back, we will get into Miller making his try at both independent creator work and also his ups and downs with the Hollywood system. And now it is December 19th, 2019, time for the favorite comic book of the week. Batman, number 85 by Tom King and Michael Janin, which concludes Tom King's overly long story arc as Batman finally deals with the alternate universe Thomas Wayne / Batman from Flashpoint, while also resolving his long-standing relationship with Catwoman. This is all things a solid conclusion to this long story that features a great conclusion to the fight between Batman and, of course, the alternate Thomas Wayne, along with finally giving you some answers on Catwoman and Batman. Not everything is resolved, as King kind of makes the point that in an ongoing series, nothing ever really gets resolved, but there are some great moments, particularly Batman's final line against the alternate Thomas Wayne. And moral note, not a bad ending. Pretty solid and to the point. Though the narrative is a bit disjointed, it still makes for a good read all in all. And I'll have to say, more or less, I'm going to miss Tom King on his Batman run. Looking forward to his upcoming Batman and Catwoman miniseries he's apparently working on. But it's been a good run so far, and probably one of some of the best Batman stories overall in years, though definitely some low points. With that, the next time you'll be hearing me, it'll be post-Christmas Day, so I hope everyone has a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas. And till then, go out and enjoy yourself. Good comic books.